So it seems like things are boiling over everywhere. Anytime you turn on the news, there's fire and protests, and obviously our streets are on fire. Well, I mean, we obviously saw that in Paris, where a new meme was born. Basically, there's a video of a couple sitting at a typical French cafe on the street, enjoying a nice conversation, and they're not even acknowledging that there's a fire in the background, which is sort of symbolic of the moment in time, how we just look away. Did you guys see that video? Have you seen the sort of funny memes coming around? Don't worry, it's one of those ones that will grow. But
it is okay. I understand a Frenchman not being bothered with what's going on behind him anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's the dog with the cup of coffee, right? In the house is on fire.
Yeah.
This is a little bit fine.
Yeah, but this was actually a real example rather than a cartoon. So so France is going crazy. I'm trying to understand all the different sides of it. It's actually hard to understand, but like one of the stories is like a person who is a garbageman. It's a very physical job, and having to work another 2 years at that age is a very difficult thing for them to do physically, right? So, maybe tax the wealthy more versus doing this, but at the same time, the whole world's moving this way. Israel, obviously, there's a lot going on there. I was speaking to someone from Israel yesterday to get their perspective, and I'd really encourage, if you've got any Israeli friends, to talk to them, because I don't think the media really gives a good perspective. We've got political protests in Kenya, which is the opposition, and they've been banned. And then in Poland and Bulgaria, the farmers are up in arms because the wheat from the Ukraine is being moved through these countries, but no one's organised for that wheat to go to where it needs to go in places like Africa. So it's being sold on the market, and here's the farmers who've got these incredible higher costs because of the lack of fertilizer, and their market's being dumped on with this wheat. So they're up in arms, and of course the US is, who knows what's going to go on there. On the other side, there's this other sort of movement that's happening, and it's the left intellectual sort of conversation that's going on social media, and I'll include some in my weekend reads. And there's one about the UK that was really striking. I mean, what's it going to take to get the British on the streets in those sort of numbers? Because all of their failing institutions, they've got plenty of reason to get out, but they're not. And all of this has been predicted as we move into the climate economy, which is a term that'll be used more and more. And obviously, it's going to get much worse because our governments are not preparing for what's next at all. They're not keeping an eye on the things that matter. And we saw, the British climate preparation report has come out this week. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, but the headlines are saying they're not ready. Because one of the things you've got to focus on, if you want to bring the people with you, you've got to give them security, and that's income, food, and health, but I'd also add dignity. And I just believe we're at a point where we need a combined vision for the future, and we need to come to an agreement of how we move together through these challenging times, because it's not going to get better. It potentially could get better. No, it's not going to get better. I've got to be honest. It's not going to get better. It's going to be hard for all of us everywhere. So do we allow it to turn into calamity, or do we come together and say, let's come through this time together, let's build resilient cities and the infrastructure we need, or do we just let it fall apart? So handing it over to you guys for your thoughts.
I have a quick thought, and I think a lot of people who are able to listen to this or read the news or have access to the internet to discern and go through some of this stuff, I think they think that it's not going to hit them as badly as possibly 5 billion poor people. And they're probably right to a degree, because those people who are very underprivileged around the world are going to be really, really hit, because they won't have anywhere to go. They won't be able to be served by their governments. The migration, they'll be locked out of places that the affluent will be able to move to. And that's that dystopian sort of possibility. And I think that's largely why a lot of stuff isn't happening.
I think it's one of the small-minded sort of thinking of this time. Suella Braverman in the UK, she said, hundreds of millions of climate refugees are coming. Correct. That is the prediction, right? And it's like, so if you don't want that to happen, because also the UK could be full of climate refugees that need to move too, right? So it's not like it's just going to be the people from the global south that are going to be on the move. It could also be the people in the north who have to move more north, or if AMOC fails, they'll have to move south. So what we need to be doing, I think, is really just do everything we can to help people stay where they are. Help the countries. You know, the colonial sort of era took so much from the global south, and I think it's actually time to give back to the global south to help them build resilient infrastructure so they can stay where they are, so we won't have hundreds of millions of people on the move, which is going to create societal collapse. So I just don't think we're thinking with a big enough vision. And the best thing we can do is help people stay where they are.
Yeah.
And we have to do everything that's required to achieve that.
And coming back to the point which I said, you know, we all are interdependent on each other.
Mm-hmm.
One piece of the jigsaw is missing, or it will have a ripple effect on everyone. And countries which have the resources and have the ability to help other countries, they need to go out and help them and make those places more resilient. Not just resilient, also it's a matter of education as well. How is this going to impact them and everyone around them? So it's not about me. It's all of us as a big global community.
Yeah.
It occurs to me, actually, as you were saying that, as well, and Andrea, with your comments about migration to the UK, actually, I think the UK is way ahead of the curve with regards to keeping people from coming to the UK. And I think it's been a sustained government policy of incompetence to make sure that nobody wants to go there. Yeah. And so, but going into, okay, that was a bit tongue in cheek, and so, but yes, but that mass migration that's going to happen across the world, that is the really scary one. The thing is, though, Andrea, it means that these countries need to invest in these other countries. But why would they want to do that? I mean, the thing is, they're happy to do it if it's a war. Because look at what's being poured into Ukraine. Obviously, there are deals being done as to where the food goes afterwards. But you know, they're happy to do it with the war, but they're not happy to preempt this sort of stuff and invest like that. It seems.
Yeah.
A government that says that will be voted out of power.
Yeah, so that's where we all need to come to an agreement of what needs to be done, and then we need to vote leaders that are capable of doing that. But I mean, countries aren't even preparing their own countries. You know, a report, England's not even remotely ready. Australia is not even remotely ready. You know, there's just the basic. I think Singapore is probably one of the best prepared countries in the world for the environment that's coming. It's not, you know, there's long term. It's, you know, potential. It's going to have to be evacuated because it'll be far too hot to live, or the oceans will be there, or whatever, right? But no country's doing it. They're not preparing the infrastructure for hotter weather, melting roads, train lines collapsing because it's too hot. You know, there's so many parts of it. But I think we need to, first of all, invest in keeping people where they are by making sure they've got the right infrastructure, the latest water technology. So, because people need, you know, just water safety and then the next stage is building the Arctic cities that apparently we're all going to be living in. We need to be building that. So if people do need to get up and move, they've got somewhere to go. They've got nowhere to go. They're going to be freezing, adding to the rest of of humanity that's suffering in freezing conditions in refugee camps across Europe, or in the poorer countries in the world where the majority of refugees are. So we just got to have a bigger vision here.
So I was at a conference some time ago where it was all business leaders, people rather successful from a Singapore business perspective with international connections. And broadly speaking, there's a lot of people who want to do something about it, and they're standing at the line waiting to do something about it. But there is this reticence, which basically they don't want to be the first ones to do it.
Yeah.
right? Everybody else. I think there are plans in place. I think no one wants to announce the plans that are in place. We don't want to say that, no one wants to have that headline goes like, well, the British government is well prepared for the end of the world. But they are prepared the same way. So like the way Singapore is prepared for a lot of things. I think we're prepared for a lot of things to happen that we never say we are prepared for, because it doesn't work. And one of the ways that Singapore has been rather successful, and a lot of countries like Singapore, is this thing where we watch and learn, and then we engage very quickly, or we implement very quickly. So there is this thing. Everybody doesn't. I mean, we think about what's right, what's wrong, what's going to be this. We actually don't know the answers. We have a pretty good sense of what is right, what's wrong, what the next action should be. But is it right? Is it wrong? We'll only find out when someone actually does it, and then we can go like, okay, now adjust. So we're kind of this at the edge here, where everybody goes like, okay, things are really bad, and everyone's saying, okay, you go, no, you go. So we're kind of there, and it is quite hard to be that first mover. So that's what happened with COVID in the first place. When COVID, it was a problem, the scientists said this is going to be a big problem. A lot of time was spent waiting to go like, okay, let's see what happens next. So we're kind of stuck there. This is why I keep going back to this benevolent overlord idea that I have. We frequently don't have the kind of perspective to make those big decisions. I mean, none of us have got that overview. Maybe we don't have the egos to take those chances as well. And perhaps we need to go like, okay, well, you've got the big enough ego, you've got a big enough perspective and the big enough research to have a pretty good idea, better than I do, about what's going to go on. You do it.
I guess the thing, though, is the first mover stands to lose an awful lot if everybody else doesn't move.
Yep. So, I mean, I think it's going to be some kind of a populist movement where we kind of gather around somebody we believe in, and they go ahead and do something really bizarre. I think we've had people who said that we could buy up all the oil companies, for instance, and change what they do. If enough of us get together, do that, make that happen, put ourselves behind somebody who makes that happen, that could happen. I mean, I was just thinking about this bizarre idea that what happens in one of these days, the only place that's livable is the Arctic. I mean, what happens then?
We destroy it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Even speaking up about it, still people are reticent. They're kind of putting their toe in the water, and they're feeling, as someone who's been doing it for a long time, it's been interesting to watch the evolution of people starting to speak up more and more. But I mean, to me, the big ideas are obvious. Like we sit down with the scientists and say, where's this going to go? How bad is it going to get? And what can we realistically do to get prepared? Or is there nothing we can do, and we've just got to accept we're moving into a 10-degree world, which is one of the predictions, right? So do we just have a good time and face the end with a smile on our face, right? Or do we do everything we possibly can to navigate our way through this? And it's getting prepared for where we need to be, where the cities need to be. We should be looking at moving farms to places where they're going to be guaranteed to grow. And we don't know where those places are yet, but have you seen the California floods that have basically wiped out the food basket of California? That's going to have a huge impact, and more and more risk of global famine, right? So food security, water security, we know it's all there. So what do we need to do about it? And I think someone like Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. So the Singapore media, to me, is always a really interesting media because it communicates with its citizens the priorities of the government. And I reckon in the last 12 months, probably maybe 6 months, it's talking more and more about climate change. It's getting the citizens ready for the issue and what the impact is going to be. Have you guys noticed the Singapore media from that perspective?
We're getting water shortage info coming now.
Yeah, exactly, right. So stuff
like
that.
It's not saying water shortage, it's just saying.
But yeah, it's getting people to think about it, right? And I actually think because every time he speaks, world leaders listen. He's just one of those people that has his diplomacy skills, I think, are the best I've ever seen. I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but I think he could, if he spoke to the citizens of Singapore, and he's one of the first to speak about climate change as a leader, before he leaves office, just really talks to the community about what's coming. And just that moment, just him speaking, I think could ripple around the world and have a massive impact. So we need that sort of action.
I'll give him a call.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'd love to work with him. I'd love to work with him on the speech, with some climate scientists and some other communications professionals, and sit down and work out what is that message in a way that is powerful enough to have an impact, but is also going to protect what is Singapore.
It's
as
people.
well,
It's people oriented. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think that's the direction, actually, Andrea. I think it's getting this voice into politics.
Yeah. And very few have got the courage to do it, but I think he would, because he's finishing his term soon. He's listened to, respected. So I don't know. And if Xi in China spoke to his people and said, "Come on, guys, we've got to come together. We've got to do this together," that would have a huge impact as well, right? So we're not seeing that yet, But we need leaders to bring us together and say, "This is the situation we're facing. No matter which way we go, it's going to be hard, and we need to work out how to do this together." So the majority of us can come through with some level of life at the end of it, right? Because there's 33 other glacial lakes in Pakistan at risk of bursting. We saw the impact of the last one bursting last year. So there's 33 others that we're going to see heat that we've never seen before. So are we going to see multiple collapses? What does that mean? Is Pakistan a country that needs to actually be evacuated? Are we already at that point, asking those questions? So
I don't think they'd be allowed into India. Look,
No.
I think I'm just trying to think, why wouldn't the politician have that conversation? And I think they might think twice about that conversation if they go, we've got some real data that this is going to happen in 30 years' time. They may have just taken a big gun and shot it into their economic foot because they're not going to get the foreign investment coming and setting up the factory or the hub or the banking thing or the whatever it is, because they're going to think this place is too much of a climate risk.
Yeah.
So
it's the
they
money.
may not. So then they may not have that conversation because if the investment comes, then they've got the resources to be able to do something responsible.
Yeah.
But if the investment doesn't come, then you're tapping reserves until they run out, and you're, scrambling. And I think there's not a lot of countries in the world that are in surplus.
Yeah, and that's an absolutely critical part of the story, right? You've got to manage the risk now versus later. But the other thing is the preparation, 2050, 2100, 2200, that sort of mindset. It's not in alignment with what we're seeing the climate scientists saying is actually happening now, and the escalation, and supposed to happen in 2050. It was supposed to happen in 2080. It's happening now, right? So the escalation it has begun. So it's about saying, how do I need to lead now? Not, the person that would have been doing this job in 2050. So the time scale is getting shorter. And I think that's the shift that's created the urgency. And I think politicians would all be struggling to say, well, God, how do we do this now? Because we were preparing for this then, so that's another change.
So the problem that we face, I think, as a globe right now, actually, is too much democracy, and how and how it's expressed. The idea of democracy is really good, but the system that we've got to implement it, I think, is what's a problem. When you have this idea of regimes that can change over a period of 4 or 5 years, it's automatically, it's part of the thing that you can't do long-term plans, and you're trying to guide something which requires 50 years of runway. the system that we have isn't designed for that. I mean, it really isn't. It isn't designed for that, because the things that will cause the captains, to change, may not be anything to do at all with the thing that they're actually worried about. I mean, you imagine if you're on a ship where you go like, we're going to change the captain because we don't like the food. And it's nothing to do with the destination. It's nothing about getting through the icebergs or whatever it is. That's the kind of world we live in right now. People are angry about one thing, and therefore they shoot themselves in the foot over that, and then the next thing happens. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking about with regards to what would then be the political ramification of it speeding up, like Andrea was saying. And the political ramification would be turntable politics with new leaders coming in and getting thrown out, like we've been seeing with the UK and Brexit, right? So the UK and Brexit, they went through like half a dozen prime ministers, as each of them was trying to solve something that was a mess from the previous one, and they were ill-equipped and weren't given enough time. And that now imagine that globally. So I guess the difference is global warming is global, like the pandemic was. So the pandemic was global, so everybody was in the same state of panic, and as a result, you weren't looking at somebody else being in a significantly better situation than you, or whatever. So that would be the only thing that I would think. But I think that's the danger.
We actually still have the same problem even with COVID. To be fair, I mean, we had all these different things, different brands of COVID management, and different areas of pointing comparison. I mean, the fundamental problem.
What I mean is, we didn't see the leaders churn quickly. Leaders tend, in a crisis like a world war and something like that, the leader who seems to be the most stable, like a Churchill, seems to stay there until it's cleared, and then they boot him out because they just need fresh. Everything else, they get rid of the austerity and they bring in the hope person or whatever it was. So I don't know. That's an interesting one because.
Yeah, I was just going to give Robert a chance.
One of the things which, when I'm listening to all of you and what I've seen in the papers and all that, when the core focus is just profit, money, nothing's going to work then. This is not going to happen. When the focus is going to turn about the wellness of humankind, of the environment, of the planet, then things will work. But any government or any business or whatever, we tend to focus on what is the profit I'm going to get out of this. And until we're going to be in that mental frame of profit, money, nothing's going to be resolved. People are going to only work in their own self-interest. What am I going to make of it? How much am I going to make of it? How can I kick someone out of this? Because it's a very selfish way of looking at it. And so this thing about interdependence is not going to be happening for these people because they're only thinking about themselves, me, myself, and I. That's it.
Yeah.
The challenge with
it's more of a how are we educating ourselves in terms of morals, ethics, principles, and for the greater good with what's going on.
Well, that's being stripped out of schools at the moment, though.
Yeah. So the only thing is we can do is, as individuals, we have to do whatever is possible, little by little, wherever it's possible for us. Because no one's. I mean, it's like, if you know recycling is good, do the best to do the recycling you have to do. If you know something is every little counts, even the smallest thing, even one person making a change will count in one way or the other. If we keep on depending on the governments and other people, and one guy will lead us or one lady would lead us, no, it's not going to work. We all have to lead ourselves to do just that little bit. What have I done different today to help the environment, the community, so that it can prosper? That's it, and come from a space of well-being. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
So the thing that I hear often, and it's very often the idea. Okay, what's caused the problem is capitalism, but it's seldom not seen as the answer. It could be the answer to the problem. Like if you look at what Singapore does, and a lot of what it does, it actually converts the problem into an incentive game. It makes it into an economic game and tries to figure out a way of incentives and schemes to make people behave in certain way or do certain things, and the population in terms of what they buy, in terms of the companies and what they do. And it was kind of what I heard at this big conference is, and like there is a whole bunch of incentives that are on the table and can be turned into incentives that can make us work towards it together. As in, like, I mean, the think of it in terms of like the SpaceX prize, but the prize is all the gold left, all the gold in Fort Knox, which is now nothing. But if you imagine that kind of a super prize, incentivize maybe not billionaires just to have to go for it, but incentivize teams to do something and put some kind of great reward out there. Companies do behave just like organisms in salt water or oily water. They will move away from what is damaging to them, and they'll move towards what is good for them. And sometimes what it is it's a combination, and the combination is governments using capitalism in a way that moves the needle. The problem right now is the people who have hamstrung the governments are actually the people themselves. So the population stops the government from taking the big action that's going to move the companies.
Yeah.
And that's really where the problem is. We are the problem. As in, like, when I saw something on social media that day, someone was posting about one particular topic, and then someone said, "Well, I'm not going to say anything, but I don't trigger off the snowflakes." And I went, "No, that's the problem. We're not able to have these conversations so that we can say, okay, you know what? This is as a group, this is the right thing to do. We need to get together. We need to have this chat. We need to say this is the right thing to do, and then let the governments know that it's okay." Like Singapore, I think, is just at the right place to do something about it right now, because we haven't gone that far yet. I think 5 years into the future, 10 years in the future, Singapore will not be able to do what I think it's going to be able to do right now. As in, like, I think Singapore is, in terms of the government, is losing its grip in terms of what it can do with autonomy. Where it can just call upon the mandate and say, we'll take this drastic action or whatever it is. Because we're getting into the phase right now where we're thinking too much about ourselves in terms of my tweet, well, not tweets actually, more my Instagrams or my messages, my TikToks, whatever it is. We're getting into that place, but we haven't quite got there yet. And what's really good is here things are being taken care of so that people can say, like, yeah, okay, everything's okay. We can deal with these other problems. The rest of the world has a great difficulty because the basic things aren't being taken care of. I don't have a job. I don't have enough food, no security. Education's bad. Let's not talk about the big ideas. Help me get to tomorrow.
Yeah. Forget about tomorrow. Help me get this 1 hour sorted out. In some cases, that's what the challenge is.
Just give me enough money to pay for heat because I'm freezing.
Yeah.
Give me enough money to feed my children.
I mean,
so if you take that stress away from people, then they're going to be able to think about other things, right? But there's too much stress, and I think the job I see that I've got now is just to try and help people see that what the path that we're on as a society, a human society, is a great awakening. It really is a great awakening. And Carl Sagan said it to the US Congress. We need a massive rise in consciousness. And Rohit, you were saying everyone does a little bit, and actually Antonio Guterres said everything everywhere all at once as far as action goes. So we need to take action, business needs to take action, government needs to action, like action everywhere, because we're on the cusp. If Greenland goes, the ice sheet goes, like Singapore is no more. It'll be underwater. Maybe you'll have a little hill left, but we're moving towards those lines very rapidly. So we need to get on board. Is democracy the right idea? I don't know, Joe. Like, that's obviously not a popular conversation that anyone wants to have, but I think it's one we should have. I think we need a council of sages, the wisest people in the world from all age groups come together, and they sort of overlook the transformation. We just need to think in new ways, and the economy needs to be redesigned, with earth at the core, nature at the core. If you're making a profit but destroying nature, and that cost isn't factored in, then that's a mistake, and that's a big problem with the economy, right? So there's some big things that we need to change, but we need to, I suppose, right now, what we need to do is get our heads into the game and really start thinking about what does this mean? When I talk to people about some of the things that we need to be thinking about doing, they're like, oh my God, they haven't even gone that far in their thinking. We have to radically change how we think.
Well, I think it's in Rohit's world. I mean, we need mindfulness at a global level. It needs to be something which is where as I do something. I mean, the whole idea of mindfulness is just for myself anyway. It's like I keep track of what's going on and my repercussions on others, and I think there needs to be this combination. I think we need to move a bit out of the idea of just fix the problem yourself. I think we're trying to say. I mean, you know, we talked about being independent, interdependent. We need to acknowledge that while all these things are about me, I do feel about how you feel about me as well. And I think that the world is on fire right now because there's a lot of animosity towards each other because I am concerned about what you think about me. I don't like that you don't like me. And therefore, I'm not going to work with you. And that is amplified now because of silos and stuff like that, and with AI which reflects what you say. So it's the digital mirror, and we're going to have more of that building up as well. What we really need is, and I've regrettably, this is what I've always found. You know, someone needs to die. I mean, it really is that kind of a thing where something really, really big has to happen, and we go like, oh, that was really bad, you know, and then we wake up. So it's an entire country disappearing, an entire island disappearing, you know, like, you know, something like, when the tsunamis happened, the first time that whole wave of tsunamis happened, pardon the bad pun with the word wave of tsunamis, but when the tsunamis happened around the earthquakes in Indonesia, that changed the world in terms of how it thought about tsunamis and risks and stuff like that. And it was because of the abject destruction that happened out of this one singular event, and it had to have human lives involved, because we've seen what happens with forest fires. You can have 1 billion animals burnt in a forest fire. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't make us really wake up. But if you have 1 million people disappear suddenly because of one event, you get a chance, not a permanent chance, but you get a chance to focus attention around it for a while. Now, the problem is we're in this attention deficit world. We're trying to work with attention, and the politics is so bad now because any chance to draw attention to anything becomes instantly politicized. One incident means 10 different things based on what you want it to mean. And we need something right now to happen, unfortunately, a climate calamity, which is irrefutably a climate calamity.
Because what we've seen isn't enough, right? So I think the wildfires in Australia, and the fact that Australia is going to be hitting 1.97 warming when this El Nino kicks in, which could potentially destroy the entire Great Barrier Reef. I think hopefully that's enough, you know. But the more we wait, and the more extreme the events get, the closer we are to the tipping points, and the less chance we've got. Because
see, the question also arises: is where does this extreme happen? If it happens in a so-called what we call the third world or the developing countries, would people even give a damn about it? But if it happens in Pakistan, a more developed country, what would be the reaction then?
Yeah.
It took 24. It also depends where it's going to happen as well.
It took 24 hours for the event in Pakistan to hit global media. And I couldn't believe that. Like, because it was the largest body of water ever released on Earth. That was the story. And it took 24 hours for publications like the New York Times to pick it up. I mean, the BBC picked it up because it's obviously got a strong heritage with Pakistan. But I just that, you know, I couldn't believe it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like,
well, you would think it needs a global pandemic.
Yeah.
Of climate pandemic for everyone to feel it at the same time. Which you know what? The only thing I can think of that would do that is a sheet melting and sea levels drastically rising by 2 meters. And immediately you would go, we get it.
Yeah.
But then everyone will be in calamity mode.
Yeah.
So I'm just, the more I think about it, the more it seems to be going towards an Elysium / you remember 2012, that movie 2012, where they built big arcs, and who was getting on the ark?
Yes.
And the people that were getting on the ark were all the rich people.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else, and then the whole thing came down to the workers are out there who built this thing. Can't we let them on? And then that was the big dispute. But there was still 7 billion other people about to die or dying. And so it has that focal point, because if everybody is not in surplus, if all these countries are not in surplus, they're all indebted here, there, and everywhere, and that's about trade and control and everything. Not very many are in surplus. Then when calamities like this happen on a global scale and frequently, and the insurance companies all go down because they can't pay anymore, then there's has to be, I would have thought, has to be some people in the control area going, look, we got to make some tough decisions here. And I hearken you back to great famines in China, where they went, we're just going to let half the population die because we can do it. And then, tyrant and evil, but I think everybody's going to, I think that's, in a sense, it sounds to me like that's where it's going to end up.
Yeah.
Which means survival comes down to, weirdly enough, which means nothing's going to change while people try to get that, that's not a great hopeful story, I'm afraid.
No, and it's not necessarily guaranteed either. But sorry, Rowan, this idea that wealth will get you through, no. It doesn't. The tipping points, they're all very, very different, and depends on which one goes first. That's when you'll start be able to understand how to make the decision of what's your next move. So if the AMOC current collapses, which it's on the way to doing, the entire northern hemisphere will be in an ice age, which means that we'll be able to reflect enough sun back into the atmosphere that potentially could cool the planet down, but it'll be pretty crap for the northern hemisphere, and but the south might have a chance. So it depends if that happens first. That's a different outcome. So there's lots of tipping points, and that's kind of what I'm paying attention to. Which one will be first to go? But I think we should wrap up. Sorry, Rohit. I know you wanted. Do you want to just say a final thing?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So I got a question quickly, Andrea, as a part of a wrap up. Where do you buy the next house?
You don't buy a house. I honestly. Buy something that can move. So a Winnebago or a boat. But yeah, being mobile. But you don't want to have a stranded asset, and anything. To me, this is just my decision. Anything physically tied to land is not a good idea. So do the research on where you live before you make that decision.
In Dubai, you have your floating villas, which they're promoting sometimes.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but be able to move. But anyway, so what's
No Show? They talk about the week. No Show. What's happening in our streets? No Show. They'll help you understand all the latest issues going on in the land, making sense of what's going on.